The coronavirus pandemic has been a source of hardship and disruption, and that includes disruption for in-person worship for people of different faiths. One response by Muslim communities around Boston, starting in the holy month of Ramadan, was an effort to provide protective face masks, primarily for first responders and essential workers. Among those supporting the initiative were local Muslim physicians, the Islamic Society of Boston Cultural Center, and the Council on American-Islamic Relations, Massachusetts, or CARE. We'd like to welcome the Council's Executive Director, John Robbins. Thank you very much for being with us, John.
Thank you for having me.
John, for people who are not Muslims, tell us a little bit about Ramadan and the tradition of charitable work during that time.
So the holy month of Ramadan is a special month during the year for those of us of the Muslim faith. It's a month in which Muslims fast from sunup to sundown each day and engage in extra prayers during the night. It's very similar to what you might think of as Lent in the Christian tradition, for example. And during that month, acts of charity and goodwill are especially encouraged. So this means donations of individuals giving donations, feeding the needy, taking care of orphans and the poor, and in general, outreach to those around us, making sure that those in the wider community know that the Muslim community supports them in tangible acts of good. It's in that spirit that we engaged in this project.
Well, it's not surprising that people chose to demonstrate charity with protective personal equipment. That seems to be very much needed. But tell me a little bit about the people within the Muslim communities who generated this idea, and I know this involves some physicians as well, right?
There was a group of local physicians who were thinking about what they can do during this month to make an impact, how they can more broadly support those who they were seeing day in and day out who are coming in with real concerns and fear. And a lot of uncertainty as well. How can they protect themselves and their families? What does it look like to be supported? And so they said one tangible way that they could do that would be to use their medical training, their medical knowledge, and their connections to be able to bring over a large number of masks to supply to those who are in greatest need, such as first responders, those working with the elderly, those working in high touch and high impact sectors of society. And so we were able to bring over at this point 40,000 masks through some private fundraising within the Muslim community. And we wanted to let the wider society know that their Muslim neighbors do support them during this time and will continue to.
Well, nowadays, it's easy to find masks at supermarkets. They aren't that expensive, maybe. But go back, a month or two here. This was not so easy. So how did that really work out?
Yeah, so during that time, we were able to secure direct distribution from international channels. So a few of those were indirect from China. A few of those were indirect from the Middle East. But even while individual masks in small numbers have been able to be procured right now, even the city of Boston itself has had difficulty with procuring large numbers, so thousands or tens of thousands of masks. And as this thing continues to drag on, what we're going to see is a need for large numbers for people who are going to need to swap them out on a regular basis. We're going to need to have daily large number interactions, and so that we can continue to provide that. So that was part of the impetus there from the physician network and from organizations like the ISBCC and CARE, which saw this need and hope that we'd be able to help fill it.
Well, it's one thing to even get a large quantity of masks. It's another thing to distribute them. How did that roll up from the people who were taking part in it?
So there's a couple of different facets there. After procurement, we deployed them to 3 different mosques within different geographical areas. So the majority went to the ISBCC within Boston to serve that community. A smaller number went out to the Sharon community. There's a large mosque there, the Islamic Center of New England. And then a few thousand additionally went down to Rhode Island to a mosque there, Masjid al-Islam, which is just the Mosque of Islam, basically. And so the idea being that these mosques know their local communities best. They know their local distribution networks and needs, whether it's first responders, whether it's firefighters and EMS, whether it's medical workers directly, whether it's just people like Uber drivers, for example, who have large numbers of people coming in and out of their vehicles every day. Within Boston, the ISBCC is working closely with the Mayor's Office of Infectious Diseases to identify the most at-risk targets and populations to be able to facilitate distribution there.
Well, ordinarily, people go to worship service for in-person contact. It's not just something that happens, it's important to them. They can't do that, at least they haven't been until very recently. How do activities like this fill the void for congregations?
Well, certainly, as much as faith is internal and it's recognized there, it's also greatly and deeply external, and all traditions recognize this as well. So certainly there's a deep element of communal gathering. During Ramadan in particular, each night is spent in communal prayer. That is that people go into the mosque, they stand, for hours on end together, shoulder to shoulder, next to hundreds or even thousands of other people in many cases, such as at the ISBCC. This month, that was drastically reduced. People were praying at home and they were really craving that connection. So being able to feel that wider connection, not only to our own internal community, but to the wider community as well, be able to say that we're an intrinsic part of society that's not just asking, but also giving back, was very welcoming to people. And a lot of Muslims reported that this was a way of them feeling like they were still a part of society, even when so many doors and many houses of worship have been closed.
I want to ask you about the congregations themselves, because even at the onset of the pandemic here in Boston, we got, not surprising, news about people who had basic needs that they couldn't get hold of, sometimes because of their lack of money, other times because they were just hard to find. What about the people in the community? I mean, you've got professionals at one end of the spectrum, maybe they're doing okay, but you have people, you mentioned Uber drivers, you mentioned people who might be working in food services and other areas, they might be out of work. I mean, there must be people who are having a really hard time right now.
Absolutely. And there are relief organizations that work within the community, such as the Islamic Council of North America's Massachusetts field office. There's Muslim Community Social Services. Both of these work and serve the Muslim community while also serving the wider community. So any low-income individual is eligible for their support, for example. So these have been seeing a huge uptick, obviously, in people who are impacted by COVID, who are still having extreme difficulty finding work, extreme difficulty finding food. What a lot of mosques have been doing is saying, we have here, for example, an elder group. So we maybe have 65 elderly members of the community who are housebound, who are fearful of going out, who can't go grocery shopping. We're going to pair each one of them with a host family that can take care of them and take care of their needs. And then a lot of them are expanding that as well and saying, well, what about elders from outside of the Muslim community? How can we pair with them and have individual families who want to be helping those families deliver food, deliver much needed goods, provide laundry care even. And so a lot of mosques have been doing that across the state, whether it's in Burlington, whether it's in Andover, whether it's down in Sharon or over in Quincy, or even out in Worcester. Mosques in different geographical regions have been filling up and stepping up to find those needs.
Well, right now, we're all fielding a mixed message about the pandemic. We see all these indicators that are looking better and better, but we're also being told we're going to have more reopening, more in-person exposure to one another, and we still need protection. So what about this initiative? Is there going to be a future to it? Is there going to be a need for future support?
Well, as the needs evolve, we hope the initiative will evolve as well. Whether it's individual testing kits, for example, that might arise as a need down the line, whether it's swabs, whether it's other forms of personal protective equipment such as gloves or other kinds of face masks. We're prepared to evolve that programming as the need goes. And in keeping with that, also mosques have been evolving as they've been opening up as well in response to these new guidelines. So some mosques have said we're going to remain closed completely because we don't feel safe or comfortable, or that we're able to open our doors in a safe and manageable way. Some are saying that we're going to have a reservation list, so only the first 40 or 60 people who sign up can come in, and we're going to maintain social distancing, maintain hygiene procedures, and make sure that we're keeping everyone safe. There's a huge diversity there, but what remains constant is a commitment to ensuring the safety of the wider community.
We should mention that if people do want to help out and find out more, is there a way they can follow up on that?
Sure, so they can go to isbcc.org, and that has the program details as well for them.